I'd like to call this hearing to order, and good afternoon, everyone. Administrator Klotz, I'd like to welcome you in to your second appearance before the subcommittee to testify on the budget request for the National Nuclear Security Administration, which includes programs to sustain our nation's nuclear weapons stockpile, advance U.S. nuclear nonproliferation goals, and support the nuclear Navy. Admiral Caldwell, I'd like to thank you for your service to this country and welcome you to your first appearance before this subcommittee. Since the Director of Naval Reactors serves an 8-year term, we look forward to having you this year and many years to come. You're probably going to outlast me. I'm at that stage of life where 8 years is like, have we got our plots ready? General Davis, I'd like to also welcome you and thank you for your service to the country. This is the second time you've testified before the subcommittee, but the first in your new capacity as the Acting Director of Defense Programs. Ms. Harrington, I welcome you back. I believe we may have actually lost count of the number of times you testified before this subcommittee. The expertise you bring to the table is incredibly valuable, and we thank you for your continued dedication to the nonproliferation programs. The President's budget request for the National Nuclear Security Administration is $12.9 billion, an increase of $357 million, or 2.9% above last year's level. Since the overall budget caps set by the Bipartisan Budget Control Act are flat compared to last year's level, the increases requested for defense activities for NNSA will need to compete with other important defense programs across the federal government. Within the NNSA budget request itself, that same competition for resources is evident. The administration's nuclear modernization and naval reactors is increased by $45 million, while nonproliferation activities are decreased by $132 million. We hope to hear more from you today on the prioritization in your budget request and how you intend to accomplish the modernization activities that are needed to extend the life of our nuclear deterrent within a constrained budget environment. Please ensure that for the hearing record that responses to the questions for the record and any supporting information requested by the subcommittee are delivered in final form to us. Note to the subcommittee for the record that they please do so by close of business on Thursday. With those opening comments, I'd like to yield to our ranking member, Ms. Capter, for any opening comments that she would like to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, certainly, General Klotz, Admiral Caldwell, Ms. Harrington, and General Davis. We appreciate your appearing before the subcommittee this afternoon. And since this subcommittee last met to review the National Nuclear Security Administration budget, the world continues to see challenges in disparate areas of our globe. It is through that lens that we must assess our strategic future, including, importantly, nuclear security. The possession of nuclear weapons brings an awesome responsibility, and no one knows that more than you do. Still, nuclear weapons serve as only one component of our national nuclear strategy. The NNSA Nonproliferation Program also plays an essential role in securing nuclear material globally and provides a rare, though admittedly recently more limited look into the Russian nuclear program. Congress and this subcommittee in particular must balance the need to maintain our nuclear weapons stockpile with the importance of reducing global vulnerabilities through nonproliferation efforts, and additionally the tremendous amount of money spent on nuclear capabilities compels a sharp attention to ensuring financial responsibility. The NNSA makes up a sizable portion of this subcommittee's bill, with nuclear weapons and naval reactors representing 83% of NNSA's total budget. Mindful of the many needs of our nation, this subcommittee must ensure precious resources are provided as part of a coherent strategy. Further, the NNSA must demonstrate a continued ability to better manage projects, particularly in the weapons account. I remain concerned about repeated and astonishing cost increases and schedule delays that plague the NNSA. The nuclear deterrent is too important and resources too precious to waste funds pursuing unnecessary or unrealistic proposals. While NNSA has made progress toward more rigorous project and financial management, much work remains, as you well know. We look forward to our discussion today, and Mr. Chairman, I thank you for yielding the time, and thank you all for being here.
And I understand, Administrator, you have the opening statement. You're going to do one, and
yes,
the others
sir.
were submitted for the record. Is that correct? Time is yours.
Okay, thank you, sir. Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Capter, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to present the President's fiscal year 2017 budget request for the Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration. We've provided you a written statement and respectfully request that it be submitted for the record. We value this committee's leadership in national security as well as its robust and abiding support for the mission of the NNSA. Our budget request, which comprises more than 40% of DOE's overall budget, is $12.9 billion, an increase of nearly $357 million, or 2.93%, over the fiscal year 2016 enacted level. The budget to exceed, NNSA must maintain cross-cutting capabilities that enable each core mission, again as defined in our strategic vision. These cross-cuts focus on advancing science, technology, and engineering, supporting our people and modernizing our infrastructure, and developing a management culture focused on safety, security, and efficiency, adopting the best practices in use across the government and in the commercial world. If you'd like, I'd also be pleased to provide a copy of this document to the subcommittee for the record. The budget materials and briefings we have provided describe NNSA's major accomplishments in calendar year 2015, as well as the underlying rationale for our budget proposal for fiscal year 2017. Let me just briefly highlight a few points here. First and foremost, the United States has maintained a safe, secure, and effective nuclear weapons stockpile without nuclear explosive testing for over 20 years. NNSA's FY 2017 budget request continues the steady increase in the weapons activity appropriation. And in fact, this account has increased more than 40% since the FY 2010 budget request. As a result of the funding provided by this Congress and supported by this subcommittee, and the significant improvements NNSA has made in program management over the past 2 to 3 years, all of our life extension programs are now on schedule and within budget. NNSA's science and technology base also continues to yield critical modeling and simulation data and to deploy increasingly capable high-performance computing in support of stockpile stewardship. Last year, for example, the National Ignition Facility at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California increased its shot rate, that is the number of experiments that it does, from 191 in 2014 to 356 in 2015, almost doubling of the shot rate, including the first ever experiments at NIF using plutonium. Our budget request also supports the recapitalization of NNSA's aging research and production infrastructure, most notably the facilities where we perform our major uranium, plutonium, tritium, and other commodity operations. Of significance, NNSA completed the first sub-project titled Site Readiness for the uranium processing facility on time and under budget. This year's request for the Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation account is 6.8% lower than the fiscal year 2016 enacted level for 2 reasons. First, prior year carryover balances are available to execute several programs in this mission space. And second, we propose terminating the mixed oxide or MOX fuel fabrication facility project and pursuing a dilute and dispose approach as a faster, cheaper path to meeting our national commitment and international agreement to dispose of 34 metric tons of excess weapons-grade plutonium. The request for our third appropriations, the Naval Reactors program, keeps pace with mission needs and continues NNSA's commitment to the 3 major initiatives undertaken by NR: the Ohio-class reactor plant system development, the land-based S-8G prototype refueling overhaul taking place in upstate New York, and the spent fuel handling recapitalization project in Idaho. For each of these missions, NNSA is driving improvements in management and governance. For all of our programs, we have instituted rigorous analysis of alternatives, defined clear lines of authority and accountability for federal and contractor program and project management, improved cost and schedule performance, and ensured that federal project directors and contracting officers have the appropriate skill mix and professional certifications to effectively manage NNSA's work. Our budget request for the fourth appropriation, that is federal salaries and expenses, reflects an increasing emphasis on improving program and project management across all our mission pillars. So in closing, the nuclear security enterprise continues to make significant progress, although as the ranking member pointed out, there's still work to be done. Through discipline, careful planning, consistent funding, and your continued strong support, we believe we can make smart investments to build on that progress and to meet new challenges in the future. So again, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. We all look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Administrator Klotz. Ms. Capter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Klotz, I have a question relating to weapons dismantlement. And the budget request includes a significant increase for weapons dismantlement, something you have not typically supported, at least at this level. And I understand that some of this increase is due to Secretary Kerry's announcement to accelerate dismantlement by 20%. What benefits does this increase bring to the budget, to the workforce, and are there benefits beyond simply dismantling more weapons?
Thank you. That's an extraordinarily good question. We have all along been continuing a dismantlement program to dismantle all those weapons that were retired prior to the year 29 by the year 2022. Last year, for instance, in FY 2016, the Congress enacted $52 million to continue dismantlement activities, which take place both at the Pantex plant in Amarillo, Texas, and at Y-12 in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. As you rightly pointed out, Secretary Kerry committed the administration to seeking a 20% increase in the funding that we do for dismantlement. Therefore, our request for 2017 is roughly $69 million, so a significant increase. In addition to allowing us to complete or meet our pledge to dismantle all those weapons that were retired before the year 2009, it'll allow us to do that a year earlier. But in addition to doing that, it will allow us to hire more staff at Pantex. We estimate that we will need to hire between 35 to 40 people at Pantex to do this increased workload. We'll also need to hire an additional 10 people, we estimate, at Y-12 to do this work. So once we have these people on board at both of those sites, they've gotten their security clearances, they understand how the processes work at both plants. If the need arises elsewhere at Pantex or at Y-12 for other work that we do, and we do work for all three of our mission pillars, particularly at Y-12, then those individuals would be ideally suited. So we also see it as a way of starting to build that next generation of workforce, both at Pantex and Y-12. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, sir. I'd just simply add that, these weapons will never be returned to the field in their current condition, so dismantling them also gives us some strategic materials that we can use in our other life extension programs. So it also provides that role.
And we continue to, even though a weapon has been retired, we continue to have to, assure the safety and the security of those retired weapons. So I used to be in the same uniform as General Davis, and the last thing as a commander you want to do is have things sitting around your base that you don't need anymore.
Do you have an estimate of the numbers of those weapons that will be dismantled?
We would have to tell you the specific numbers in a different setting, but be happy to do that.
Thank you.
We do have a chart that lays all that out, so we'll share that with you.
Thank you. And just one other question on domestic uranium enrichment, General. Your fiscal year 2016 budget request included $100 million to continue operating uranium enrichment centrifuges that were constructed as part of a joint demonstration with the United States Enrichment Corporation, or USEC, now known as Centrus. You now do not believe that this effort is worth supporting. So I have three little questions. What changed in the intervening year? When will we require a domestic capability for tritium needs? And thirdly, I understand that given the time horizon, you are now considering you may look at technologies beyond ACP to achieve a domestic enrichment capability. How will you make a determination on which technology to use?
Thank you for the question, and if I forget to answer one of them, please remind me.
First, what changed in the intervening year? You now believe that the effort is not worth supporting?
Well, there's a number of things that were done over the past several years. One, in accordance with congressional direction and also direction within the executive branch interagency, we embarked upon a very serious accounting of the current and future availability of low-enriched uranium, high-enriched uranium, and tritium to meet our defense needs. We also took a look at analysis of the various types of technology there were to produce all three of these commodities. And then we also took a look at the preliminary cost and schedule estimates of what it would take to build the Secretary referred to it this morning as a national security train of centrifuges at Piketon. One of the things that was revealed as we did this inventory of uranium is we were able to find additional uranium that could be used to meet our defense needs, whether it's in the production of tritium or for naval reactors or for the weapons program. So the need that we had.
Did the gentlelady yield for just a second?
I would be very honored.
When you say you were able to find extra amounts of this material, is this just laying around? Don't we keep track of this?
There are various types of, yes, there are various types of uranium that are in a form which might not be readily usable in the way in which we've traditionally done it. For instance, leftover materials that we're using at Y-12. If you are doing a cost analysis of whether you want to go out build a whole new capability in rich uranium or invest the money in taking this uranium that might otherwise have been uneconomical to use for these purposes, the cost curves drive you to the point it might be less expensive to develop the capability to use that uranium.
So it's not that you found this uranium in the back of the shed?
No, sir.
That you didn't know was there? Okay.
No, sir. And so there is cost associated with that. And in the out years, we will show those costs of what it takes to develop that uranium and downblend it for the purposes that we need to use it for. So in any event, given the fact that the need for this uranium was, or the need for it to have to use or develop a capability of using only U.S. technology to enrich uranium got pushed out to roughly 2040. We used the cascade, the 100 to 120 large centrifuges that were piped in for several years to basically do a proof of concept to do the research and development for these large centrifuges which are there. In our assessment, we have now obtained all the data that we need on how to, at this point from the facility at Piketon. There are still work that we will continue to do on the large centrifuges at Oak Ridge in Tennessee and the K1600 facility that's there and another facility located at Oak Ridge. And we feel that will allow us to continue to learn what we need to learn until such time as we need to build out a large national security train to do domestic uranium enrichment with U.S. only technology. In the meantime, we've also—
saying it's after 2040?
That's when we will have the need for that. So we would have to, and I'd have to give you the specific dates when we would have to start thinking about developing that. And you're right, we're also, now that we have the opportunity to do that, we also want to consider the possibility of using smaller centrifuges to get to the same objective. And we will do that work at Oak Ridge as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fleshman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank each and every one of the witnesses for being here today and for your outstanding service to our great nation. General Klotz, it's always good to see you, sir. Before I begin my questions, I do think congratulations are in order to the entire NNSA team. It was reported, I believe, last week that the completion of the dismantlement of the retired W-69 warhead at Y-12 is complete. Thank you very much. That's the way it's supposed to work. My first question to you is usually about the same subject. It's the uranium processing facility. The UPF at Y-12 is obviously very important to me and I think to our country and its national defense. Will you please give an update on the status of the design process and any details that you can give us on the status of the project as we ramp up for construction, and specifically, what do you plan to accomplish in fiscal year 17, sir?
Thank you very much. And as I think the Secretary showed you a chart this morning in the course of the hearing, which lays out, I think, in great detail the approach that we're taking for constructing a uranium processing facility, the objective of which is to get us out of building 9212, which you've visited many times, sir, at the Y-12 complex by the year 2025 at a cost cap of $6.5 billion. So what we have done, again, at one point we were thinking about building a big box to house everything that was in that facility and move it in, and as a result of ideas that were conceived in the NNSA and DOE and thoroughly studied by a red team chaired by Dr. Tom Mason, who is the director of Oak Ridge National Laboratory, we have now come up with what's known as the modular approach, where we are segregating various activities that need to be performed to process uranium by hazard category and by security category, placing them in different buildings, and of course there's a different cost structure associated with the level of security and the level of safety that you have to achieve. The first sub-project under the redesigned approach was called the Site Readiness sub-project. I had the great pleasure of joining you when we cut the ribbon on the completion of that last year. Again, as I said in my opening statement, under budget and on time. We are now in the midst of work related to the Site Infrastructure and Services sub-project, which will continue to prepare us for the actual construction of the UPF facility once we are ready to do that. The project is actually underway, will cost about $78 million, and we expect to complete that in April of 2018. So a lot of the work in 2017 will be devoted to that. We are also continuing the process of the design for the nuclear facilities, the three main facilities, two of which are nuclear facilities, the mechanical and electrical building, the salvage and accountability building, and the main process building. So that will also continue over the course of the next several years, and we will also be getting ready to do the next two major sub-projects, one called to work on electrical substation at Y-12, and also one called site preparation and long lead procurement.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask you a question about high-risk facilities. I was pleased to see that NNSA's budget requested increased funding for the high-risk excess facilities. Would you please explain what can be accomplished over the next few years, especially and specifically at Alpha 5 at Y-12, described as the worst of the worst?
Well, one of the things that we do have in this budget, Congressman, is we put in some additional funding to ensure the safety and security of Alpha 5 as well as Beta 4, two major facilities at Y-12 which are no longer in use. However, they still exist. Our employees have to go in there from time to time to make sure that they're safe and they're secure. And there are risks associated with them doing that, risks from fire, contamination, water intrusion, and so on. So we have asked for additional money in this particular budget specifically to go in to carry out a very structured, disciplined approach to making sure that we have done the work that's necessary to sustain those buildings for the long term. As I think the Secretary testified this morning, one of his directives that we are carrying out, not only in NNSA, but at the other parts of the DOE, is to arrest the growth of deferred maintenance. One of the things I learned in my time in the military is in an era of constrained budgets, the first dollar will always go to mission and to people. And the dollars that are necessary to sustain infrastructure, to do repairs, whether it's roads or facilities, always gets pushed to the right. It gets deferred. And there's a tendency to want to take risk in that area. Well, at some point you take risk, you can only take risk for so long until you get to a tipping point. And literally at places like Y-12, the ceiling starts to cave in, which will shut down operations for extended periods of time. So with the support of the Congress last year in the 2016 enacted budget, we were able to basically hold the level of growth in NNSA's deferred maintenance to level, and then there will be a slight downturn in the overall level of deferred maintenance, which quite frankly right now is at $3.7 billion for the NNSA.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back to round two.
Mr. Frelinghuysen.
Gentlemen, and Ms. Harrington, we had Secretary Mabus in this morning and Admiral Richardson, CNO, and so I'd like to get some sort of updates on your characterization of where we stand, Admiral Caldwell, with the Ohio-class subs. This committee makes substantial investments, and obviously they're matched on the Department of Defense side. Where are we?
Yes, sir. First off, sir, thanks for the question and thanks for the great support that Naval Reactors has enjoyed from this subcommittee. It's enabled us to be successful, and it will be important to our future success. My responsibility for Ohio replacement is the design and the way ahead in the engine room and the reactor plants. We are, the simple answer is we are on a great track, and we are on track to support the Navy's goals. And the Navy's goals are to start construction of that national asset in 2021, to complete that construction in 2028, and send that ship to sea in 2031. Now, that's a fairly aggressive timeline for construction. We're building a ship that's about 2.5 times the size of Virginia, and we're going to do it in 7 years, the same time span to build the first Virginia-class submarine. On Naval Reactors side, this year, and with the support of the subcommittee's past support to us, we are moving forward on the system, component, and equipment designs and final designs that will allow us to do heavy equipment procurement in FY19. Two other big portions in this are the development of the electric drive system, which we will get to a full-scale testing at the end of FY17. That will be a very important milestone. And then the other big component in Ohio replacement is the life of the ship fuel. That ship will be loaded with fuel once and will last over 40 years without ever refueling. And we're on a great track to do that and start manufacturing the core in about FY19. It'll take about 5 years to develop that core. So again, thanks to your success, we're on a great path to meet the Navy's timeline, and our FY17 budget submission allows us to continue that path.
This committee under Chairman Simpson, and certainly on the defense side, we're supportive of it. There's some pretty extraordinary costs involved here. How are you staying on top of some of those costs, and what's the estimate for the first Ohio-class sub? It's pretty high.
Well, the first will be on the order of about $9 billion, and follow up about $5 billion. Those figures are being, looked at closely. In regards to the design work that I'm responsible for, the total bill is about $1.7 billion on the DOE side, and that enables me to do all of this design that gets the electric drive to provide the stealth that we need to operate this class out into 2080, and allows us to do the detailed design work to develop this life of the ship core. That's not a trivial undertaking, but we're on an excellent path with periodic program updates to me. My staff is out providing the regulatory oversight and the management oversight to make sure that these projects are on track. We're very involved, and I think, again, thanks to the support of the committee, and the FY17 budget is going to allow us to continue that. So we're exactly where we need to be on the Naval Reactor side.
A few years ago, and I don't include you in the group, people were rather dismissive of what the Russians are doing and the Chinese are doing. Whatever they had in the way of subs could never match our capabilities. I should hope that's always true, sort of like verifying the nuclear stockpile. But in reality, we find in open sources Russians ginning up their game. They have, some pretty extraordinary capabilities. I assume the Chinese aren't slowing down their building of subs, both nuclear and diesel. Any observations besides obviously the Navy's view that you will always have overwhelming superiority. Is there any recognition, especially since we're making, we mint 2 Virginia subs every year? We want to continue that. But what the end product we're looking at in terms of the replacement, whether that will be a match for the future, for future
A couple
situations.
of thoughts on that, sir. First off, I think what you're seeing in Russia and China is the understanding that that a Navy brings value to their national interest, a strong Navy in particular, and they've also seen the advantage of an undersea Navy. You see Russia developing highly capable submarines in smaller numbers, and you've certainly seen China develop larger numbers of submarines. Our responsibility in the Navy is to understand the capabilities that are out there in the world and to make sure that our capabilities are overmatched, or that we overmatch that capability. And I think we're on a great path to do that with the Virginia-class submarines and the ability to modernize those throughout their life. The Ohio replacement design was undertaken with understanding the challenges that she will face over her life, including stealth, the weapons requirements, the reliability, the endurance, all of those things factored in. And again, I think we're on a great path to deliver exactly what the nation needs on schedule. Yeah. And again, we could not do that without the support of the
Thank you for exuding that confidence. Maybe I'll just put in a plug. I understand that the Washington Carrier Group is out there on maneuvers. Is that right? Was that the aircraft carrier we were going to retire? So now it's up and running?
It is back on the East Coast, sir, and it'll be refueled starting next year.
Good.
We were able to, due to some great work and support by our DOE labs and also the Naval Reactors team and the fleets, we executed a carrier swap that positioned the Ronald Reagan as the forward deployed carrier in Japan.
Well, we got to get moving on the forward, too. Thank you.
And we already are, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I hate to do this, but we have 9 minutes to vote, and we've started actually trying to constrain it to the time allowed so that so the first vote doesn't go on for 45 minutes. So we're going to have to leave for just a minute. If you could stay around. This shouldn't, I think we have 2 votes. Is that right? Yes. Have 2 votes, and so we'll be back right after that, and I would encourage members to come back as soon after that second vote as we can, so that we don't have these ladies and gentlemen sitting around all day when they have important work to do. So,
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
we'll be recessed for a few minutes.
We'll be working.
Every vote's important to somebody.
Absolutely.
Myself, every shot helps somebody. It's a good shot and a bad shot. Are you ready? Be back in order? We'll be back in order. Representative Royal Allard.
Deputy Administrator Harrington, last year you spoke to the merits of the Nuclear Smuggling Detection and Deterrence Program, which is at the core of our strategy to deter, detect, and interdict illicit international trafficking in special nuclear and other radioactive materials. In the FY16 budget hearing, you explained that the reason for the roughly 6% decrease in a funding cut from FY15 was due to the success of the program and the ability for our partners to be self-sustainable and take responsibility of their own operations and maintenance. This year's request is nearly level to the FY16 enacted level, even as there have been reported cases of radiological material going missing in recent years, including most recently in Iraq. Are you confident that the current funding levels will reinforce our global nuclear security infrastructure in the face of today's threats? And how does the NNSA help ensure that its self-sustainable partners are preserving the high standard for detecting radioactive materials that the NNSA holds?
Excuse me. Thank you very much for your question. Yes, the Nuclear Security Detection and Deterrence Program is key to our counter-nuclear smuggling efforts. We have a high degree of confidence in the capabilities of the program, in part because we continually are reviewing and realigning where necessary. We have gone through 2 program reviews in the last 4 years, and one of the conclusions from those reviews is that depending on the geographic and other considerations that we have to take into account, diversifying the technologies, not just the fixed detectors, but mobile vans, backpacks, handheld detectors, have to be designed as part of an overall suite of capabilities. Included in that suite of capabilities is our collaboration with both the law enforcement communities in the countries where we work, as well as intelligence communities, all of which contribute to a multi-layered defense. You talked about sustainability. That is absolutely key. And if anything, it is the dog and not the tail of this whole effort, because it is the ongoing commitment with each of these countries, their ability to work effectively with their neighbors and within their regions, that actually builds the global ring of security. So we pay a great deal of attention to that. And what we never intend to do is simply build a capability and then drop it and walk away. We build networks to sustain professional interaction among these capabilities and to provide continuing education, if you will, training and updating both of skills and equipment. We are moving more into doing a variety of tabletop and field exercises to really push the limits even more. I hope that answers your question.
How do you prioritize which countries to work with, and what sorts of factors do you look at when considering new partnerships? And what new countries do you expect to partner with in fiscal year 2017?
So the prioritization of countries, I can speak about generally, but as you surely appreciate, a number of our considerations would be classified, but we could give you a more detailed briefing on what some of those considerations are. Clearly, the presence of established smuggling routes, the presence of nuclear and radiological materials, the stability of the country or regions in which we see these materials, and other elements are part of a package of considerations that we take into account in our selection process.
Okay, thank you. Administrator Klotz, the Stewardship Science Academic Alliance Program and the Site Stewardship Minority Serving Institutions Partnership Program were consolidated into one program in FY16. This action was taken to improve the effectiveness of these programs and to encourage additional partnerships among minority-serving institutions. Can you please provide an update on how this restructuring is doing, how the program is specifically working with Hispanic-serving institutions to get the next generation of Hispanic youth excited about the STEM fields, and if you have seen an increase in the partnerships of minority-serving institutions?
Thank you very much for that question, and let me take the specific response in terms of the numbers for the record, if I could, for a question for the record. But just let me underline just how important it is to us in the areas in which we've reached out in all regions of the United States to bring minority-serving institutes into our programs for internships, for small activities, but also support to various academic institutions in building curriculum and providing scholarships and work opportunities for people in minority-serving institutes. We just last year we developed a program for training students from minority-serving institutes, largely in the southeast United States, for cyber security, which we think is going to be one of the most important fields, not only for NNSA and for the Department of Energy, but also for just the government and commercial operations in general. Everywhere I go, I make a point when I visit our sites to meet with the people who support those programs, and it's something we're absolutely committed to.
Thank you. Do I have time for another question? Okay. NNSA's Radiological Security Subprogram works to secure certain radioactive sealed sources located in soft target sites such as hospitals or universities. And this work reduces the risk of terrorists acquiring radioactive material that could be used to make a dirty bomb. The NNSA states that FY16 funding will be used to complete security upgrades for 95 domestic buildings containing radiological material. For FY17, your budget request includes funding for only 45 buildings. There are 225 additional buildings planned to complete security upgrades between FY18 and 21. Why does the funding request include only 45 buildings, and how do you plan to complete the 225 remaining requests between FY18 and 21?
Thank you. So radiological security is a high priority for us. The schedule that we have is one that we believe is realistic, and what we need to emphasize is that all of these buildings in the United States meet Nuclear Regulatory Commission requirements for licensing these sources in the first place. So this is an augmentation above and beyond those baseline commitments. Part of the shift in funding is an increase in the amount of funding that we are putting into what we call our Alternative Technologies Program. And this is a pathway to permanent risk reduction, because there are alternative technologies available. For example, blood irradiators are often found in hospitals and other organizations, and could be replaced by X-ray based technology, so you don't even have to have the source in the facility in the first place. So we are trying to encourage both new technology development as well as greater utilization of existing technologies to eliminate some of these classes of radiological sources altogether.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your time today. I've got a couple questions. Ms. Harrington, negotiations on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, have concluded, and the Department of Energy is expecting to play some kind of role in implementing the program. However, your responsibilities for implementation are unclear. Is there any funding in your budget request to support the nuclear agreement with Iran? I asked the wrong person the question, I'm assuming. Or,
No,
and B, what is the role of DOE going forward, and why should Congress support these particular DOE activities?
Thank you for that question. It's an extraordinarily good question, and I believe, as Secretary Moniz testified this morning, there are a number of ways in which the Department of Energy and NNSA are associated with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Probably the most important way in which we are involved is our continuing close relationship with the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is headquartered in Vienna. As you know, under the JCPOA, they have the lion's share of the responsibility for monitoring Iranian compliance with every provision of that agreement. As I said, we have a long association with them. We provide training to their inspectors. In fact, as the Secretary mentioned this morning, every IAEA inspector since 1980 has taken a course in nuclear material measurement at Los Alamos Laboratory, in addition to professional continuing education and a whole host of other areas. We also provide technology, electronic seals, tamper-proof cameras. There's also a piece of equipment that is specific to Iran and the JCPOA called the OLEM, the Online Enrichment Monitor, which you can fit around a pipe and actually measure the enrichment level of uranium gas, which is flowing through that pipe to ensure that it is not being enriched beyond the levels that are permitted under the JCPOA. In terms of specific additions to the budget, it's for the NNSA budget. In addition to that work, which we continue to do anyway in international safeguards, there's an additional $13 million that we have that we're requesting. That will largely go to pay salary and travel for those people who are involved in the redesign of the Iraq reactor, ARAK reactor, to ensure that it meets our nonproliferation goals and cannot be used to produce plutonium, and that we also have some additional work in other areas. So,
and then I'm glad you brought up the IAEA. The Government Accountability Office recently released a report that states the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, the agency responsible for verifying and reporting back to the international community on Iran's compliance, the quote is, faces an inherent challenge to detecting undeclared nuclear materials and activities. Do you believe the verification measures that exist will be sufficient for the IAEA to monitor compliance with the agreement? And what will be the greatest challenges, and are there any opportunities to improve the limitations of current nuclear verification techniques?
I do believe that the verification measures that have been put in place through the JCPOA are absolutely right for the agreement. And in fact, to be perfectly honest, when we came out with the agreement, many of us were very surprised and very impressed with the level of verification that was written into that particular agreement. It goes well beyond any other agreement that we have struck or the IAEA has. As the Secretary mentioned this morning, we essentially will monitor every aspect of the Iranian fuel cycle, from the mining and milling of uranium all the way to its disposition in the end. If there is diversion of material to other uses, that's how it will become obvious when you see that in how the fuel cycle flows, beyond on-site inspections, beyond all the technological monitoring that we talked about. Now, as the Secretary said, it's always a challenge to find those areas which are at undeclared facilities and large open spaces. We also have a very capable American and allied intelligence capabilities that will also be paying attention to that.
And just one more on cybersecurity. Mr. Administrator, as you know, the Department of Energy has experienced a number of data breaches in the past. The data breach last summer, which involved files held by the Office of Personnel Management, was a huge failure for the federal government. The performance measures in your budget request consistently say the cyber program is effective. What are you doing to protect employees and, obviously, most importantly, our national security information? Do you believe that the measures put in place thus far are sufficient?
This is one of the greatest challenges I think the federal government faces, whether it's on the executive branch or the legislative branch, and also in commercial industry faces, and that is maintaining the security of its cyber networks and its databases. It seems like we always have to work to get one step ahead of what the state of the art is for those who would try and penetrate our systems. We take this very, very seriously, one, for the protection of our people and their personal identifying information, to guard against the risk of that being compromised and leading to identity theft. But also we guard some of the most important secrets that the U.S. government has in the nuclear area. So there is always more that can be done.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
I might add to that, if I could, one of the initiatives that Ann Harrington, I think, has actually spearheaded both for the U.S. government and the international community is to draw that connection between the physical protection of nuclear facilities, including civil nuclear plants, and and protecting their vulnerability to cyber attack. And she has led the charge in getting that onto the international agenda of concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
General Klotz, I want to return to some of the questioning that I had interacted with or posed to the Secretary this morning regarding just the architecture of our nonproliferation efforts. You have a slight decrease in the budget. I need to hear some explanation for that, please. But more than that, is the current construct, the current ecosystem, multi-agency effort to share information, to think critically, to project out what the emerging threats will be in this regard, so that we are all working toward increasing the probability as close to zero as possible of some incident in this regard. Are those efforts ongoing? The Secretary and I had, as well as the Chairman, had spoken about following up to the March report, perhaps with you in another setting, to review some of the finer points in that regard. But in terms of generalities, is the current ecosystem of nonproliferation, the cross-agency cooperation, our ability to think critically about emerging trends in this regard, are we doing enough? Are we safe? To me, everything else that we're doing in the building is inconsequential if we don't get this right, frankly.
Thank you, and I did watch with rapt attention the exchange and, through the miracle of modern communication technology this morning, and of course we can't hold a candle to the Secretary in articulating in a clear, concise, compelling way this, but let me try. On the issue of interagency coordination, and you and I have discussed this before, and we certainly need to have additional discussions. I think at the moment, my personal view is we have very good interaction at the interagency level between the various agencies which are responsible for nonproliferation: DOE, State Department, Homeland Security, the Intelligence Community, Department of Defense, coordinated by the National Security Council, which is by the 1947 law, that's their responsibility to do that. But I think there's also something that's unique about the current situation. The President made a speech in 2009 in which he clearly stated that securing nuclear materials and dealing with the threat of nuclear proliferation and the threat of nuclear terrorism was a national priority. That sort of galvanizing guidance, I think, has seized all of us who work in this particular area. So, you know, we know we should and we can work together on that. In terms of setting up formal structures, I've often thought that communities of interest in which people are drawn together because they share a common goal, a common objective, or a common need to pool resources is one of the greatest motivators in terms of making people work together. Did you have any? Yeah.
I would just add very briefly that not only do we have a very vibrant interagency process, and one that I would have to say works. I was recently involved in an issue that, in fact, involved two separate interagency policy groups. And so the White House said, this is silly. Everybody get together in one room. Let's figure out whether we can come to consensus. We came to the consensus at the Assistant Secretary level, which means that we don't now have to bother all the deputies and principals with a decision because we were able to broker that at our level. And that really is the point, is to get that engine going and real communication on substantive issues. But we also work individually. For example, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency has been a longtime partner of ours. Ken Myers will be retiring soon, stepping down as the director of that agency. He was in my office yesterday so that we could, as our last act together, sign an MOU between our two organizations on how they will work together into the future and coordinate specifically.
Well, let me ask you this. One of the challenges of being in, holding a congressional seat, of being in public office, and yours as well, is to take the legacy of what's been done and try to retranslate it in order to meet emerging needs.
Right.
Creativity, entrepreneurship. Have there been gaps identified in the current construct of our nonproliferation efforts as they exist across basically 6 agencies? Mm-hmm. Or are there duplications that don't, you reference one there, that don't make sense, that can be informally addressed? Mm-hmm. This is what I worry about. And again, I look forward to going into deeper into the report that you have appropriately issued last year. And that I may have better answers. But to the degree that you can address this, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I think that one of the issues that we would like to come back, for example, and discuss more is emerging technologies and some of the other things that we believe we have to be prepared to meet flexibly and responsibly in the future.
Yeah, there's enrichment technologies, for instance, that are emerging that would make this quite simpler than the vast infrastructure that is now required, and things of this type. It's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay. That additive manufacturing is another area
Yes.
that both has enormous promise for allowing us to do a lot of our activities less expensively, faster, by cutting down how long it takes to develop and prototype. But by the same token, there's another side of that coin which we can discuss when we get together.
The Secretary proposed, and I gave this example, that with the advent and the movement toward small modular reactors, that this technology suddenly is smaller, scalable, duplicatable more readily. Now, he, you know how he is, he's very respectful and polite. He countered the argument by suggesting that that actually takes away the need for advanced enrichment capabilities and the rest that could be diverted toward more improper purposes. But nonetheless, it's the broader problem of advancing technology without there being any singular controlling entity, I think leaves us vulnerable.
I was actually really happy that you raised that question
because
good. We have a very close working relationship with the Nuclear Energy Office, which, as you know, has the lead for advancing small modular reactor competitiveness and design in the United States. So in 2014, we sat down and looked at these reactors and said, well, that's great, but why don't we do, from the NNSA side, why don't we do a study on the implications for safeguards and security of these new designs? And so we have that study, and we'd be happy to share it with you. And the good news out of the study is that it does not create additional problems compared to existing reactors, and in some cases, particularly for the models that are intended for emplacement underground, subsurface designs, it actually adds to the security. So we'd be happy to talk through that. But we try to, within the department, to bring all those streams together and do the thinking as a group.
One more quick question, Mr. Chairman. In that regard, who drives that narrative? You rightly pointed out the President's projection of policy, his vision, and I completely agree with it. In fact, I was one of about 15 members who were invited to the White House very early on. We all rode on a bus. We could not figure out what was the binding narrative between us, because it was people from all types of philosophical dispositions. We finally figured it out. In fact, Senator Markey told me, because he was on the bus, that this is everyone who voted against the India civil nuclear trade deal. There was only a handful of us. So I want to commend the President for this, because this was important work to reestablish this ideal for the international community, that at least gathering loose material, unsecured material, is something that we could all do. And then it's a gateway to the broader considerations about nuclear security worldwide. But in terms of specific emerging technology and who drives the culture of the policy discussion in that, do you do it? Does the National Security Council do it? Does it happen organically, informally? Is there a hierarchy of process here? I'm curious. So should I do it?
The answer to all of that is yes, or all of the above. No, it is, the term I used earlier was a community of interest. There truly is a community of interest that involves not just those agencies of which we're a part that have an abiding interest in these issues. It involves interested members of Congress and their staff. It involves the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs, some of whom are sitting here, who drive the thinking, the thoughts, the ideas forward in ways in which we can make the world a safer place with respect to nuclear proliferation and terrorism.
And you're satisfied that that collaborative process, without strict hierarchy, if you will, actually is the right, proper, robust mechanism by which the spectrum of emerging threats, or the ability to think constructively and creatively about what we're doing that is leaving us potentially vulnerable, what could be updated, what could be let go of, what could be created, is actually occurring. You're confident with this process. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I forget, could you get a copy of that report to all the members of the committee?
This report here?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Happy to do that.
Thank you. Admiral Caldwell. Your budget request reports that the legacy spent fuel facility will have to operate for another 5 to 12 years after the new facility comes online in order to provide spent fuel examination capabilities. Why weren't the examination capabilities included in the design of the new facility? And Naval Reactors was working with the Office of Nuclear Energy on a partnership for the new spent fuel examination facility. Those plans have not been advanced. What is the status of this effort, and could a joint project meet the needs of both programs?
I'll answer the first part, sir, and then I might come back and ask you to just drill in a little bit on the second one, so I'm clearly answering your question. The spent fuel handling project is designed to replace a 55-year-old facility in the expended core facility that's out in Idaho. Right. That facility is aging. We've got some infrastructure challenges there. It could limit our ability to do what the Navy needs in terms of receiving, packaging, and interim storage of spent fuel. And additionally, it cannot accommodate the longer fuel that we process that comes out of the Nimitz-class carriers. So we're on a steady drumbeat of refueling Nimitz-class carriers so that they can get out to their roughly 50-year lifetime. So we've been trying to do this for a number of years, but due to budget shortfalls, we were never able to undertake it. Now, thanks to the support of this subcommittee, we've been able to move out on the plan to recapitalize that expended core facility. And we decided to do that in phases. The phasing was necessary to fit within the budget constraints that we had to deal with. I think it's important also to understand that there are several aspects of work that go on at the expended core facility today. One is that receipt, handling, and packaging of fuel, spent naval fuel, for interim storage. The other is to take expended cores from our reactor plants and go do analysis. That analysis is very important because it allows us to prove and understand whether all of our design considerations played out exactly the way we wanted them to. We learn a lot, essentially. We also do examinations of materials that are tested in the advanced test reactor. We have materials that we want to use in future cores. We irradiate them in a flux in a reactor, and we analyze what happens to those, and that allows us to build things for the future. A great example there is the Ohio replacement fuel. All of that research and study is validated by what happens and what we see in those test samples. So the bottom line, sir, is we approach this in a phased approach. And the first, most important to us was to be able to process this Nimitz-class fuel, because we did not want to impact the Navy's ability to operate the fleet. We had to be able to bring the carriers in, offload the fuel, and through a steady drumbeat, bring that fuel out and process it. So we are on a path to recapitalize just that one aspect of it first, the spent fuel handling, and that we'll start the construction in 2019. We'll start doing the operations with that longer fuel from the Nimitz class in 2024. And then we're also working on the next phases of this to go recapitalize those expended core analysis, and also the work that we need to do in hot cells, and the work that we need to do to examine samples that we test in the advanced test reactor. So that's a fairly complicated set of things we have to do, but this spent fuel handling is only one phase of it, and we're on a good path to that. Now, your other question, I believe, was is there a partnership? And I think you mentioned with the INL. I just want to make sure I understand that before I launch off on an answer.
Well, the question was could you do? You were looking at one time looking with the Office of Nuclear Energy on a partnership for a new spent fuel examination facility. But those plans seem to have not progressed.
Well, what we did, sir, we looked at what other facilities were around, which included some of the facilities out at the INL.
Right.
And fundamentally, when we got done with it and doing the analysis of different courses of action, this was the best course of action for us to go do that, because there would be too many modifications required to existing facilities.
That because of the difference in the fuel?
Difference in fuel, difference in terms of the amount of things we have to process. We have there's a lot that goes into it, and the existing facilities just could not do what we needed to do in terms of production capacity. And so this is the best course based on the budget we had and based on the outcome we needed to be able to service the Navy's needs.
Okay. Naval Reactors continues to spend approximately $130 million per year, approximately 30% of your infrastructure budget, on the spent fuel management program. The Idaho Settlement Agreement requires Naval Reactors to transfer all of its spent fuel to dry storage by 2023 and to move all spent fuel out of the state by 2035. Since DOE's overall spent fuel strategy is no longer valid, it's changed substantially over the years, and the state seems supportive of nuclear reactors' continued presence, there may be value in updating the agreement between the state of Idaho and the Navy sooner rather than later. What are your plans, or do you have plans to approach the state of Idaho about renegotiation of the settlement agreement?
First off, Mr. Chairman, we are in everything that I can control within my program is tracking to meet our agreement with the state of Idaho.
But it's what you can't control.
That's right, sir. The challenge is the national repository
right.
for spent fuel. And therein lies the challenge. We have a program now that takes our spent fuel, packages it, prepares it, and packages it, and puts it in interim dry storage, which is safe and secure. And we are in close discussions at various times throughout the year, reporting to the governor and the state of Idaho that we're meeting our responsibilities in terms of our agreement, and we're going to have to just keep working on that as we go forward. And then at the same time, I think the nation needs to deal with how are we going to handle this spent fuel. And until we get there, my responsibility is to do that work safely. The money you're giving me in FY17, or if you approve my budget request, will allow me to do what I need to do safely to store that in an interim manner while we try to figure out how we're going to go in the long run.
Well, I appreciate that. And to tell you the truth, I think people of Idaho are very supportive of what Naval Reactors is doing out there. I don't hear any complaints, frankly, and that's kind of unusual in my line of work, and in yours probably also. But,
Sir, no doubt, we get great support from the state of Idaho, and we're very thankful for that, and we aim to keep it that way.
well, you do a good job out there, and we appreciate that. But at some point in time, this settlement agreement that was done, I can't remember how many years ago, 1995. So it's what now, 20 years old, 21 years old? Who knows what the future was going to be 20 years from now? You know, I mean, you do the best you can. Circumstances change. And at some point in time, the state of Idaho, and I suspect all of the states that have had agreements with DOE that are older, are going to have to sit down and say, okay, now what does circumstances require that we do, and still meet the demands of the state and the needs of the federal government and the Navy and others. And that's always a tough thing to do, because the people that are insisting in Idaho that we follow that governor's agreement to the letter of the law are the ones that took the governor to court trying to overturn that agreement to start with. And now they insist that we follow it to the letter of the law, and we're down the road 20 years. And circumstances have changed. That's reality. We know they'll change over the next 20 years. But I appreciate the work that you've done out in Idaho, and you do a great job. And we look forward to working with you and to complete your mission. General Davis, the GAO previously found that because NNSA took an extended period of time to prepare a valid cost estimate for the B-61 life extension program, that life extension program now has little margin in the schedule left to ensure the U.S. commitments to NATO will be met. The new scope for the W-88 refurbishment was approved by the Nuclear Weapons Council in November 2014, and the subcommittee still hasn't been provided the cost estimate. What improvements have been made to the way you estimate life extension programs? Why is it taking so long to prepare a valid cost estimate for the W-88? And will the extended time it has taken to verify the costs have an impact on the refurbishment schedule? And do you anticipate the W-88 cost to rise significantly above the original cost estimates of $1.4 billion?
Thanks for that question, Congressman. Well, first, with regard to the B-6112, that program has currently completed its last year of full-scale engineering and development, and we're on schedule and on budget to produce their first production unit in March 2020. This year was a good year for the B-6112. We conducted 3 drop tests. We also did compatibility testing with the F-15, F-16, B-2, and F-35. And in fact, I was able to actually witness the first full-scale integration test of the B-6112 out at Tonopah, and it went very well. And while I can't get into specifics, I would tell you that right now we're very happy with where that program is, as is the Air Force. So that's with the B-6112. With regard to the W-88, essentially, through our surveillance program, we identified an issue with the conventional high explosive, where it wasn't aging as we expected to. And in order to make sure that that weapon continued to meet its military requirements, we made the decision, working through the through the Nuclear Weapons Council, that we need to replace that conventional high explosive. Obviously, that was something that just happened in the last about a year. Going through our discipline process, we will come up with a new cost estimate, our first cost estimate for that program in September of this year, and then we'll match up both the existing ALT 370 program, which was working to put a new arming, fusing, and firing capability into that weapon, along with the conventional high explosive refresh, and we'll match up those programs in March of 2017 in phase 6.4, which is our production engineering.
In order to make sure that a more affordable design that meets military requirements wasn't overlooked, the FY16 committee directed the NNSA to conduct an independent validation of the alternatives the NNSA selected for the long-range standoff warhead, which is in the early stages of development. When do you expect the results of that independent validation to be available? How many alternatives did you consider, and were there any that were less expensive than the preferred alternative you are now developing? And do you believe the process NNSA uses to analyze refurbishment alternatives is mature and comprehensive?
Sir, with regard to the legislation, it actually asked us to have a JASONS-like organization take a look at that. We approached the JASONs. They did not feel like this work was in their wheelhouse, so they directed us some other folks. We're currently in conversations with the MITRE Corporation to perform that analysis for us. We expect that to be done hopefully later this summer. In terms of the program, I think we, over the last several years, have put a lot of discipline into the program management. You know, when NSA first stood up, the real issue that they had was to figure out how to do this stockpiled stewardship program. How do we do the hard science to make sure that the stockpile is working as it's supposed to without underground testing? Our first life extension program was the W76, which is now just over 60% complete. So we are now taking that same rigor that we put into the science part of NSA, and we're putting it into the program management part. To that end, we recently hired, although we've not announced the candidate yet, a program executive officer that will oversee all of our life extension programs to continue to bring rigor to that process.
Thank you, and thanks for the work that you do on all this. I know it's very complicated work and important work. And your budget request, and there are many people on the floor who will look at a budget, and that's the determination of your commitment to a particular subject matter. Your budget request is down how many was it? 134? $132 million from last year. That means $132 million less commitment to nonproliferation, according to some people. Tell me why it's down, why the request is down, and what the implications of that are in terms of nonproliferation, so that we can answer those questions on the floor.
Okay, thank you. And now, the fact that we have dropped a few percentage points in the amount of money in the budget does not reflect it at all any less commitment to nonproliferation by the Secretary, by the Administrator, by me, or anybody else in the organization. But as you know, we've proposed a different path forward for the mixed oxide fuel fabrication plant in South Carolina, a dilute dispose
Seems like I heard something about that this morning.
I would be surprised if you didn't. But that's a difference of $70 million right there. And then trying to be good custodians of our budget. We have some prior year funds, which we have not been able to spend out as quickly as we had hoped. In our line of business, a lot depends on your foreign partners and their ability to absorb money at the pace that we hope that they can. The funds that are in the budget will fully fund the activities that we believe we can deliver in 2017. And we have restored in the out years the funding for the program that is implementing slower than we had hoped, because we fully intend to be able to fulfill those commitments. So I think on balance, we have a good pathway forward. We're not worried about being able to execute during 17 with the funds that we've requested.
Can I just add a little bit to that?
Sure.
And everything that Ann said is absolutely right. The good news for us last year was that Congress voted an appropriations bill for FY16. And of course, we're your biggest cheerleaders to get an early appropriations bill passed this year. You have no stronger supporters, Chairman, than for that. But there still were budget caps we had to write to build the FY17 budget. We have a big portfolio that covers a lot of different interests and with strong stakeholders behind it. No one is more passionately committed to the nonproliferation activities that we do than myself, than Ann, than the Secretary. But we had to make a hard-headed business decision. We had to be able to cash flow everything in FY17. When we looked across the portfolio, we saw we had these uncosted balances, as the Secretary and Ann have mentioned already, and it just made business sense to us to use the money that was in the bank to fund these projects in 17 until we can tackle the FY18 and beyond and as we build the next budget.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the important work that you do, and probably nobody appreciates it more than Congressman Fortenberry, who's worked on this very dedicatedly and not just from the perspective of looking at the exact budget that we have each year to look at, but in the long-range overall view of how we address this this issue, and are we looking at it in the right way and stuff. And I'm glad that there's somebody on the committee that takes a real interest in that and looking at that. So I appreciate that, Congressman and Congresswoman Capter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Davis, what is Defense Programs doing in the area of additive manufacturing?
Well, ma'am, additive manufacturing is a great opportunity for defense programs in terms of future technologies, especially in terms of fabricating pieces and parts at our Kansas City plant. In the past, we'd have to send stuff out to be manufactured. It would take several months to turn it around. With additive manufacturing at that location, we can now change the forms in a matter of weeks. So it's a great opportunity for us to reduce costs. I can tell you out at Lawrence Livermore, they're also doing some groundbreaking work in additive manufacturing in terms of how we can use it within the actual design of actual components that would go within the nuclear weapons as opposed to the non-nuclear components as well.
All right, so those would be the two locations.
Well, I would say throughout the NNSA enterprise, additive manufacturing is being used. And certainly we're pairing all of those labs and plants together to leverage what they're learning at the different locations to get the maximum effect.
Theoretically, in the future, could additive manufacturing actually serve to compromise security in any way?
Well, certainly one of the challenges with additive manufacturing is that right now it takes a lot of skill and expertise to build certain components within the weapons that we use. Once you go to additive manufacturing, really the secret sauce is in the design, and those designs are held on computers. So certainly cybersecurity is an important element to protecting those in the future. So there is certainly some hard science that still goes into the work. Certainly protecting the cyber elements of the design is important. And then also there are some unique technologies that NNSA is developing in this area.
Yes, please, Ms. Harrington.
So it might not surprise you that General Davis's group and my group are working together on this issue, looking at how to maximize the utilization of this important emerging technology, but still protect it, develop classification guidance so that we know within the complex how we can responsibly use it. So we're, again, very focused on those issues and have a great team working together to come up with a solution.
Without getting into too much detail, are there certain areas of technology that you're particularly interested in? You prefer not to say.
We could come back and talk
Okay.
about that.
All right, thank you. Admiral Caldwell, could you give us an update on the study of the feasibility of using low-enriched uranium in naval reactors that was required in the FY16 Defense Authorization Bill and funded at a level of $5 million in the Appropriations Bill?
Yes, ma'am. We completed an initial report over a year ago that just laid out sort of the high-level concerns or things that we would have to deal with in a low-enriched uranium type program. And as directed in the NDAA for 16, we have a draft conceptual study to answer Congress's question about this particular issue. That report is in routing for approval, and I can give you some sense of where we are on that. I think the first thing I would tell you is that from a strictly military standpoint, the application of low-enriched uranium is problematic, because fundamentally what you're doing is you're not putting enough, you're removing the amount of available energy that you're putting into the core. Now, we have decades of experience in using highly enriched uranium that allow us to operate these reactors for longer and longer time periods. Again, a great example is the Ohio replacement core, which will last over 40 years. Now, from the U.S. perspective, though, a low-enriched uranium core or pursuit of such things offers us the chance to take a leadership role. It also offers, within the Naval Reactors program, a chance to balance out a demand signal on our technical community, because as we come through the Ohio replacement design, we're going to taper off in the demand signal. So to sustain that workforce, pursuing an advanced fuel system, which would be required for low-enriched uranium, would keep that team working, which is important to us as we get to the next generation submarine. Now, the conceptual study, we looked at what it would take to develop the low-enriched uranium core and what it would take to deploy. The development, we estimate, would take about 10 to 15 years. It would take, as I say, an advanced fuel system because you're trying to figure out how to load more fuel in that has less energy. And that would take, again, 10 to 15 years, and it would be on the order of about $1 billion. Any work that we put towards that would be of value to the Naval Reactors program because, again, advanced fuel cell systems, we could leverage that and even use highly enriched uranium. The conceptual plan has several off-ramps. I talked before about irradiated samples that allow us to examine materials. The plan lays out several phases of irradiated materials that we would take and look at. And over those 10 to 15 years would allow us to take some off-ramps to decide whether it was appropriate to pursue the low-enriched uranium core. The conceptual study examines going after potential use in a carrier core. That's a bigger core than a submarine, and it's not practical today to go do that in a submarine core. So again, success could not be assured in this effort. 10 to 15 years just to develop the fuel system, and probably another 10 years or so to actually deploy the fuel system. That means to construct it and deploy it in a ship. So we're several generations away, but the conceptual plan lays out this opportunity. And if that's the path that we end up going down, it would take money above what we currently have in our budget, because we could not do it at the expense of the work that we're doing today to support today's fleet and the Ohio replacement and so forth. So the plan lays out a conceptual plan starting in FY18. And I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Yes, thank you very much. General Klotz, could you tell me, does NNSA need to produce any pits to support the current and planned life extension programs?
Current, no. Future, yes. And so that's the path that we're on. The major demand signal for being able to manufacture pits will be when we get into the what we call the Interoperable Warhead 1, which will most likely start off in addressing the Air Force's need to do a life extension program for the current W-78 warhead. In the meantime, however, we don't have a capability to produce pits in great number. So we are in the process of doing some significant work at Los Alamos National Laboratory in repurposing existing facility space in a building called PF4 and another building called the Radiation Laboratory. And this year we will begin analysis of alternatives, I believe this year, on what's known as the modular approach to building additional capacity at Los Alamos to begin to develop pits on the schedule which the Congress has directed us in two subsequent National Defense Authorization Acts.
Thank you, and I have one follow-up to an earlier issue, and that is dismantlements. In addition to your earlier points, isn't work leveling at Pantex also a benefit to increasing the rate of dismantlements?
Well, with additional people, of course, obviously, that gives you the opportunity to level the work between the dismantlement and the life extension work that has to go on, because the skill sets in many respects are the same. So with the additional 30 to 40 to 45 people at Pantex and the additional people at Y-12, that gives you a great deal more flexibility.
I would just say normally we do use dismantlements to balance the workload at Pantex. In this case, the folks we bring on to accelerate those will be dedicated to that effort until that's complete.
I have a final question of each of you. In general terms, is there any unmet scientific horizon or necessary workforce capability that you consider primary to conducting your responsibilities more ably? So science and workforce development.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. The biggest challenge that we're facing at the moment, of course, is the graying, and I can say that at my age, of our workforce, both on the federal side, but more importantly in our laboratories and our production facilities. In many places, we have a high number of people who are now eligible to retire. Many of them won't because they love what they're doing or they've got personal financial reasons why they want to continue to work, but they're certainly eligible to do that. So we need to make sure, both again on the federal side and the laboratory side, that we are doing all the things that we need to do to recruit the new generation, the next generation of leadership in this particular endeavor. So that's one of our greatest challenges. Oh, by the way, in fields, STEM fields, which there is very high demand in the commercial sector for right now. So that, I would say, that's one of the key things that we need to address.
Thank you.
So I would add to that some of the challenges that we face now, many of the challenges, for example, that we've seen in Iran on monitoring a really unique agreement or arrangement to limit their nuclear activities to peaceful ones only, has made us really think through what are all of the things within the nuclear fuel cycle that we need to be more aware of. How would we have more comprehensive monitoring, especially as countries continue to move forward with their nuclear power programs? So that's an area that really is of concern. And very clearly, how would we possibly detect any terrorist acquisition or intent to utilize nuclear or radiological materials? Again, getting down to smaller quantities, more difficult movements to detect. So those are the sorts of things. But again, reinforcing what the administrator said, being able to link some of these activities to universities, being able to draw talented young students into these programs, for example, through our university consortia, has provided both a unique pathway for us to get new talent, but it also helps universities identify areas of research that are really relevant to our mission. So, we will continue to pursue those programs, but I have no doubt we will see new challenges in the future, and we'll have to go back to our labs and test their capabilities on a regular basis.
Thank you. Mr. General?
Yeah, so for defense programs, I would say it's probably exascale computing. There was a time certainly when NNSA drove advanced supercomputing and basically industry provided us everything we need. Now we are not the primary user for advanced supercomputing and exascale. So as we go to exascale, it's important that we're involved so we can make sure that our codes continue to run. Obviously, our modeling and simulation is key to continuing to certify the stockpile and making sure that we understand exactly what's going on with those weapons to keep them safe, secure, and reliable.
Thank you.
And I would say that the singularly most important thing to enable the success of Naval Reactors programs is our technical base. This is the funding that goes towards our Naval Reactors operations and infrastructure, to our Naval Reactors development, and to our program direction. That money is really goes to support what I call the flywheel, the linchpin, the center of gravity for everything that we do. It supports the infrastructure of the labs and facilities. It pays for the salaries for my folks to do the oversight and meet our regulatory responsibilities. It pays for the scientists, the engineers, and technicians that do everything that we do in the program, from research, design, construction, operation, fleet support, and dealing with disposal at end of life of the core. That technical base in the FY17 budget is, the request is for $949 million. I could not do what I need to do to support today's fleet, tomorrow's fleet, to recapitalize the tools, the infrastructure, the equipment that I need to be able to ensure the safe, reliable operation of reactor plants. And I won't go into it now, but there's a litany of things that that technical base has enabled. All the research and development that eventually goes into reactor plant design. The electric drive on Ohio replacement is a product of all that technical base work over the last several decades. The Ohio replacement life of the ship fuel is also a result of decades of work in that technical base. And every day that technical base responds to requests from the fleet on the order of 4,000 requests for technical assistance that keeps our fleet operating. So your support to fund that technical base is absolutely essential to what I do.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony today. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. Administrator Klotz, I have a question about security, sir. This committee has long been concerned and acted on the concerns about security funding at NSA sites for several years. There's been an increased workload placed on life extension programs at NNSA's production facilities, including Y-12, sir, in next year's budget. Is there a corresponding need to increase security budget, or the security budget, to accommodate those increases, and how will that be accomplished, sir?
Thank you very much for that question. And of course, safe, secure, and effective, security ranks up there in the very top of what we have to do in order to protect these assets, as well as the people who work around them. One of the things that since we came into the position a couple of years ago, we have stressed is, first of all, making sure we had the right people in the right positions throughout our security apparatus. We had a lot of vacancies. We had a lot of people who were in acting positions, and we have placed great stress on getting highly qualified people into key positions, both at headquarters here in Washington, D.C., as well as at our site offices, and also making the same stress on the M&O partners that we work with. The other thing we called for was the development of a security roadmap. This was another idea that came out of the Congress, and that has been produced. And if you don't have a copy of that, I also, in addition to making copies of that document available, I would be very delighted to make that available as well. We're also, again, at the direction of the Congress, taking a look at a sort of a 10-year plan for how we refresh all of our sites. A lot of the perimeter intrusion detection alarm systems, the PIDUSes, such as the one we have at Y-12, are beginning to age out in terms of the sensors, the cameras, the other aspects of that. So we're working with the CSTART, and please don't ask me what that acronym stands for. It's an operation that we have at Sandia. National Laboratory spearheads for all of our sites in cooperation with DoD. Again, another product of congressional direction, which is yielding a lot of benefits in terms of how we go forward in terms of that security. At the end of the day, though, it boils down to making sure we have, the people and the good people to do that work. And so we've asked for some additional money in that area to help build up our capabilities.
Very good, sir. Thank you. I have a question about lithium, and whomever would like to answer that. The Government Accounting Office and the Department of Energy's own Inspector General reviews highlighted a shortage of lithium for use in refurbishing nuclear weapons, saying the demand had risen and could lead to a lithium shortage at Y-12 by 2018. Could you discuss your plans to respond and how it will affect life extension programs? And does the budget request indicate a 2-year delay in replacing the lithium facility?
Congressman Fleischman, thanks for that question. As you know, lithium is an important material used in U.S. nuclear weapons. The GAO did do the report and said that the existing supply of lithium would be used up in 2018. The key word there really is the existing supply. NSA does have a plan to create enough usable lithium to get out to 2028 by doing two things. First of all, we'll convert lithium from dismantled weapons. We also have an existing feedstock of lithium that will convert into the proper type of lithium for the life extension programs. Of course, we'll need to sustain the current lithium production capability at Y-12 until a replacement facility does come online. To that end, we started an analysis of alternatives using the NSA's disciplined process last month. We expect that to be done by the end of this fiscal year. That will examine essentially all the options that are available, everything from recapitalizing the current capability at Y-12 to perhaps looking at the potential for commercial providers to provide this capability. So we plan to have that capability online no later than 2025, giving us 3 years of cushion in between the time that that capability comes online, and we expect to run out of the existing supply of lithium.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to talk about Y-12's alarm response training. Ms. Harrington, before I ask you that question, I want to thank you. You came to Oak Ridge and actually spoke at our ETEC meeting, was very warmly received, and I really appreciate your coming in there. That's a group, meets every Friday in Oak Ridge, and it's DOE, business people. It's just a great group of contractors, and many of y'all have been there, and we get a lot done in that forum, and thank you for attending. Y-12 has been called the Fort Knox of highly enriched uranium. How are you using Y-12's expertise in securing our nation's highly enriched uranium to secure sensitive nuclear or radiological sites around the globe? And how do you see an increased role for Y-12's alarm response training that trains personnel responding to civilian nuclear and radiological security alarms?
Thank you, Congressman, and it was truly my pleasure to come down and spend time with ETEC. It's a remarkably energetic and terrific group. There's just such a sense of community there. You should be very proud.
Thank you.
So our alarm response training program, I think, is a terrific example, number one, of utilization of accessed buildings. I think we are now in our second accessed building. The first one we outgrew, and it was the old clinic at Y-12, and we identified it as being suitable for the type of training that we do there. But our new facility, and I was there for the ribbon cutting on that one, is even better because it provides us a more diverse set of scenarios within the building, as well as a very nice training area with monitors where you can see the simulated attacks and response, and how a response force would actually have to respond. So it's as close to real life as you can get with blue and red plastic guns, but it is a really effective way to train emergency responders, local police forces, university police forces on how to respond and keep their communities safe. So it's been a terrific opportunity, and we've trained thousands of people from across the United States already. We are also using it as to bring our international participants, not only to have them go through the training, but to help them see how they can set up similar training facilities themselves, particularly in areas where where there is higher risk for this kind of intrusion. So it's been a terrific test bed for us. It has really paid off to communities all across the United States, and we're in the process of, as I said, expanding both how we use it for international guests, but particularly as a model for how to do this well.
Thank you. General Davis, I have a final question for you, sir, on the Supply Chain Management Center. Members of the small business community have discussed with me rather at length their challenges with NNSA's Supply Chain Management Center, and more specifically, the enterprise-wide procurement agreements. I've been told NNSA is aware of these concerns. Are there plans to address these issues to give small businesses a more level playing field to compete on procurement, sir?
Can I take that? Because
yes, sir.
Just 2 weeks ago, I joined all the members of the New Mexico congressional delegation for first ever industry days that the Supply Chain Management Center has held in New Mexico, or anywhere else for that matter, in order to address the concerns of small businesses. 400 people signed up, 300 people showed up. They heard from the congressional delegations. They heard from the manager of the Supply Chain Management Center. What the Supply Chain Management Center is it takes, it's located in Kansas City at our operation there, but it's a strategic sourcing center which basically serves as a facilitator for companies all over the United States to become a supplier of commodities to not just NNSA's 8 sites, but also all of many of environmental management EM sites as well. The purpose of the get-together there was to address the very concerns which small business in the state of New Mexico, particularly northern New Mexico, have expressed about the Supply Chain Management Center, to tell them how it actually works. We don't direct NNSA and the Department of Energy don't direct people to use the Supply Chain Management Center. We create it as an opportunity for our M&O partners to reduce costs by buying strategically. But it's also a great opportunity for small businesses in New Mexico, but elsewhere, to, in fact, do business with DOE and with NNSA, and in some cases to actually expand beyond the local and regional areas in which they may do business now to a nationwide. So we gave them an opportunity to learn how the Supply Chain Management Center works. We gave them an opportunity to talk face-to-face with the commodity managers from Kansas City and also from the procurement officers from each of our sites, which are part of the M&O contractors. And we're in the process of collecting data which we'll share with the New Mexico delegation as well as you, sir, in this committee as to how many people responded and what the feedback was to that. We've also changed a little bit of our processes and procedures. We set this thing up 10 years ago. As a former boss of mine used to say, when you're talking about fallible human beings working in complex organizations, there's a 100% chance we don't get 100% right 100% of the time. So we know there's some adjustments. We've put in a provision whereby you can, instead of being a national supplier, you can be a regional supplier. And in fact, we've had one New Mexico company that's very successfully taken advantage of that change.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that, and I appreciate your endeavors in that regard. And my just final comment would be to Admiral Caldwell. I want to thank you for taking the time to come to my office to meet with me to go over naval reactors in detail. I knew your predecessor, and he did a great job as well. I just wanted to convey from the Oak Ridge community how much we and I cherish the relationship with the Navy and all that you do for our country, and that we, fortunately, I hope we'll be able to prepare and continue on into the future to provide the much-needed fuel as the Navy goes forward, sir.
Thank you, sir. We value that relationship, and as I think I told you in your office, I endeavor to enhance and strengthen that relationship going forward.
Thank you, sir. With that, Congressman Fortenberry, do you have any questions?
Yeah, briefly, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. As Chairman Simpson had alluded to earlier, and you all gave a good forthright answer about your commitment to nonproliferation, but as it's showing up in budgetary matters, it's sending a signal that you're going to need to explain, which you very well did. One of the complaints about government is agencies spend down the monies they have in order to build upon a baseline for more expenditures in the previous year, in the next year rather. So in this regard, you're to be very much commended for, again, being frank that there was an absorption capacity problem with other partners. You had some leftover funds. You're living under caps. That's a reality. And so you're effectively turning money back to the government, so, or directing it in other ways. So, but that creates the problem for next year. You better hope all of us are still here when you come back and show an added expenditure above a new baseline. Yep. But I think we ought to make an asterisk, a note for the record in that regard. Two other quick issues. One is you mentioned the graying workforce problem, or the graying personnel problem that you're having. I've raised this with the Nuclear Threat Initiative as well, that the idea of the next generation of academic experts, of scientists, non-proliferation, persons who willingly cast themselves into the strategic thinking of non-proliferation, military and non-military. Where are we in this regard? Are we treading water? I don't see much enthusiasm, frankly, for this field among the next generation, and that worries me. The second question is regarding the International Atomic Energy Agency, and I raised some of this earlier with the Secretary. I think they grow in relevance, they grow in prominence as again, whatever architecture we're going to have for the next 100 years to assure that civilization is not under grave threats from nuclear annihilation, that entity grows in its potential impact to keep us safe. Are you comfortable with, again, our shaping of that institution's culture? We have, I think, an excellent Director General, but continuity of process is essential, and that's harder to control in international environments. So those two questions, please.
Let me start, and I'm sure has some thoughts on this as well. You're right. I mean, there was a period of time where strategic studies, nuclear studies, defense studies in general were much more highly, there were more opportunities in various academic institutions across the United States, including the one I attended, and that sort of fell off with the end of the Cold War. But I think there's been sort of a resurgence of interest, a lot of it fueled not so much by the nuclear strategic force side of things, but the non-proliferation, the nuclear security field. We have had a number of programs in which we have tried to draw upon that expertise. One of them is the NNSA Graduate Fellows Program, where we bring in some of the best and brightest out of recent graduate programs and undergraduate programs to work with us in NNSA for a year, and then hopefully stay or go out to the laboratories. And we've had a very, very good success rate in terms of.
Are there centers of excellence in this regard across the country that you primarily turn to, or is it coming from multiple disciplines?
Well, there is a group of target universities. For example, I hate to keep picking on you, sir, but the University of Tennessee, Howard Hall runs a super program there, but he's not the only one to have, recognized that we need first-rate university-based programs that not only look at the technical issues, but blend those with the international relations and policy issues. We'd love to bring some of our fellows up to meet you, and
you can place one in my office if you like. We have more than we can handle. So.
We can't say that too loudly around our folks, because they are eager and they're talented and they're extremely bright. And some of them actually end up going to the IAEA as junior professional officers. We have a lot of young talent that feeds into the IAEA like that. They'll go over, they'll spend a couple of years in a junior position doing regular staff work, learning an enormous amount, but carrying with them all of the things that they have learned working with us.
So segue that into my question about the IAEA.
It's a very important question, and I think with the JCPOA and as we move into the post nuclear security summit world, with the nuclear security summit that President Obama will host the end of March, beginning of April of this year, the IAEA and other international organizations will likely have an even larger role and more important role to play in that process. The United States has been intimately involved with the IAEA since its creation in the 1950s. I think we know the organization very, very well. As I said earlier, we provide training, we provide technology, we help them develop their concepts. Now, it's not just a U.S.-driven thing. We have some great international partners who also believe that this is an important organization and also commit, resources and talent to the effective operation of the IAEA. We also have a lot of Americans over there. Serving, as Ann suggested, in a variety of leadership positions, as well as early career positions in the IAEA. As the Secretary said this morning, though, it's something we're going to have to pay attention to as one of the member nations of the IAEA to make sure that they have the funding they need, either through voluntary contributions or through regular annual budgets, to take on the increased workload that we have called upon them to take. I share your sentiment. I think the leadership, not just at the level of the Director General, but among the number of the Deputy Director Generals and throughout the staff, is absolutely first rate. And so I guess the bottom line is, our sense is the IAEA is a very serious, very sober, very professional organization, and one in which we feel very confident in working with closely as we together with other member nations through this international organization deal with the issues of nuclear security that we've talked about.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Vislowski, do you have any questions, sir? Okay. Well, I'll recognize Ms. Capter first, and we'll be absolutely. Ms. Capter, I know you have some.
Yes, as the afternoon wears on, we get more creative. And I was just listening to your plea for a follow-on staff, filling the bench that's coming forward, and it reminded me that I'll just tell you, the world I live in, all right, from Toledo, Ohio to Cleveland, with lots of universities and lots of young people thinking about what their future is going to be. And I recently spoke with the new head of the Berkeley lab, Mike Witherell. And I said, one of the things we need, I said, whether you're the man or we find somebody, when I was growing up, there was somebody called Mr. Wizard. And Mr. Wizard used to be on TV, and I don't know, I watched that. I mean, that was a really good show. You're too young. You wouldn't have seen that.
Thank you.
But I said, we need a Mr. Wizard out there somewhere, and a Madam Wizard now. And I was thinking about two science centers that I represent, one in Toledo called Imagination Station, and one in Cleveland called the Great Lakes Science Center. Thousands of children go through there every year. They have no clue who you are or what you do or even that you exist. We have no lab in our part of the country. We have great engineering schools, great scientists, but the federal government doesn't really meet my region very effectively. A couple years ago, we had Sailor of the Year from Toledo, Ohio, but you can't get one of your subs up the St. Lawrence Seaway, I guarantee you that, Admiral. But
You might never know where we show up.
I'm waiting. So my point is, your budget is quite sizable, and there are lots of funds spent on communication and messaging. You may not be the proper place in the federal government to do this, Ms. Harrington, but I really want to push you a little bit to think about the assets that you do have and how one would develop broadcasting, programming that would link to our science centers. You must have old collections. You must have very interesting material stored in warehouses all over the place. And I'm not the only representative who has these incredible institutions in their community trying to help raise the next generation and trying to find a way to engage them. Now, there's a man that broadcasts, and I have no investment in his company, or I don't even know if he has a company or if it's a nonprofit or whether, Bob Ballard, who goes down and finds all the shipwrecks. And he works for National Geographic some of the time, and the kids are just, this is a really big deal. And we had an old tanker that went down in Lake Erie many decades ago, and just getting all the oil out of that thing and doing it in the right way, virtually showing that on a big screen in these science centers. I mean, the kids get really interested. So I know you work at such a different level, but there just might be a way of bringing some individuals in from these science centers and just talking to them, do a convening from places like I represent across the country, and link to them and the teachers that are taking these thousands of kids. Can you imagine what that's like? School lunches, and everybody's got to have boots on, and you've got to take them down there, and they go through these exhibits. But you have, can you imagine whatever you could draw, Admiral, from the nuclear Navy? What you might have there that these science centers aren't running, and these kids will be interested. And General Davis, you know, whether it's additive manufacturing, we have some of these platforms in these science centers, but what you might bring to it, and from the science arena, Ms. Harrington, what you must have that you can't communicate to us here, but maybe something in there, and finding somebody like a Bob Ballard, I'm not pushing him, but he knows how to reach the public. And I think you could really be a force. You could really be a force out there, and I don't even like the name STEM. I always say STEAM, because if you don't have the arts, the rest of it doesn't really work. So I always talk about STEAM, not STEM, and because you got to have the other half of the brain there too. And I just think we shortchange our children, especially from Washington, because we seem so far away. But I just urge you to think about a mechanism to draw in. Maybe, you know, General Klotz, you can think of a way to do this. Particularly the Department of Energy is far removed from the ordinary person compared to something like the SBA, you know, that's on the ground and they got agents and all these other things going around, or the FBI, which is a lot closer. But so I would just urge you to consider that. You might have something to offer. And I thank you for
Ma'am,
listening.
can I offer a comment on that? I think
Yes.
you might be surprised if you were to go around to naval institutions around the United States, and I would venture to say even other Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, that you would find in the public, you would find a lot of military members involved in their communities in advancing STEM and probably STEAM to some extent. There are a variety of programs out there, things from robotics to developing undersea vehicles. I know that some folks in my headquarters have been involved as just things that they're interested in helping students learn about science. And even the labs have folks that they've sponsored and brought in and pursued science. So there is a lot of that goes on at various levels across the United States with service members and people who are in the federal government that are interacting with folks on a human level and developing interest in science.
Thank you, Admiral. I'm thinking of one of the men that works for our court system in one of the counties I represent, who takes children that have been through the court system, and one of the, he's actually a parole officer, but one of the projects that they involve hundreds of children in are building ships, seaworthy vessels to go out on the Great Lakes. Can you imagine that? And these kids are just into it. And we haven't lost anybody yet. So, you know, we really, so I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm thinking if you could, I would say formalize it, but create a spot for it inside the department somehow. We didn't have a chance to mention that to the Secretary this morning, but I thought I would throw that. And by the way, I have to say yesterday, the Medal of Honor was presented to a wonderful member of our armed forces who was born in Toledo, my home, and grew up in Grand Rapids, Ohio, which I used to represent and don't any longer, but we are very honored by his service, Eric Byers.
I want to thank the ranking member for her comments. Thank you very much. Mr. Vislowski.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Administrator, a recent National Academy of Science report recommended a clean slate approach to building new nuclear weapons and building prototypes in order to exercise design and production skills. Do you agree with the recommendation, and do you believe NNSA and the lab should be focused on building prototypes? And if so, do you have any sense on the cost and how it compares with other priorities you have today?
No, that's, thank you, Congressman. That's a very important question. I think within the NNSA, within the DOE, we certainly recognize the importance of exercising our capability to do the whole range of activities associated with nuclear weapons from cradle to grave, you know, design, development, manufacturing, prototype building, and testing. Now, there was a couple of a letter each from the laboratory directors that were sent at the request of the Senate Armed Services Committee, which addressed the importance of all this. But the sense I took from that is a lot of the work associated in that kind of chain of activities is already being done in the very robust scientific and technical work that is done in support of the stockpiled stewardship program and in our life extension programs. There was a report that was recently rendered that talked about the possibility of prototyping, and there is some congressional language that directs that, I think in the NDAA. That language was passed relatively late in the year, in December 2015, of course. And so we have been looking at how we would operationalize that, recognizing that there is a cost associated with that, that there are a lot of other priorities within the NNSA portfolio, that if we're going to do a program in this particular regard, we need to, vet it as a program that would require Nuclear Weapons Council a blessing of it, as well as appropriation and authorization from the Congress to do that. Okay. Well before this congressional language came down, General Davis's folks had already established a thing called the Defense Program Advisory Committee, and that's one of the things we specifically asked them to take a look at, and they are expected to report out in the early part of this year. Okay. So this is something under active consideration. I think we're actually, it's one of those things we're actually doing more in this area than we often recognize we are given credit for.
If I could ask on the interoperable warhead, how much work is slated to be done in 17, if any at all? And how much capability are you retaining to support the interoperable warhead, which was deferred at least 5 years from 2015 to 2020?
So within the actual program for the W78-1, there is no money asked for in FY17. Within the RDT&E program, we will be doing some work that will prepare for certification of that system and to make sure that we understand the challenges with certifying a system that will have a common nuclear explosive package.
Okay.
But some of the work that was done, there was a 120-day study after that work terminated to make sure that we fully captured and archived the work that had been done up to that particular point. But as General Davis indicated, the timing of that was moved to the right because of other priorities within the budget, and a question of when do we need that kind of capability? And as I mentioned earlier, it comes up first with with the need to do a life extension program or do something with the W78 warhead.
Okay. Well, right before we broke for votes earlier in the hearing, you had talked about deferred maintenance, and I think the backlog was $3.7 billion.
Yes,
also understand that reportedly by 2019, NNSA may have up to 600 excess facilities. Closing facilities, despite people's assumption that it's easy to do, I appreciate is not. But also to the extent you can save money on deferred maintenance on facilities that are no longer needed by the United States of America, it's a savings. Where is the administration in that? What difficulties are you facing? Is it a question of money or any help that the committee can give to you? And I don't diminish the problem of closing anything.
Yeah, there are two major problems. The most important one is, of course, money to do that. As I mentioned earlier, in a constrained budget environment, the first dollar always goes to the mission and to the people who perform that particular mission. These other things get deferred. To actually give you the numbers, at the end of fiscal year 2015, which just passed, we had 421 excess facilities in NNSA, 90 of which we identified as high-risk facilities. Now, the other problem, of course, is some of our facilities are contaminated. So before we can turn them, before we can either demolish them or turn them over to environmental management to do the demolition and disposition of it, we have to do some remediation associated with that. And that also is both technically challenging and costly. But we are ramping up the things that we want to do in the area of disposition. One of the most important things in this particular budget is we just opened up a year or so ago a new facility in Kansas City. We got out of a 3.2 million square foot World War II era production facility into one half the size, a lot less expensive to operate, far more efficient. And then we're asking for money in 2017 to disposition that by turning it over to a private developer, which can disposition that facility for about $200 million, where we estimate it would cost the federal government about $900 million. So that will take a lot of our square footage out.
Taking Kansas City as an example, is there much as far as job loss in communities that are attached to some of these excess facilities, or is it simply a question of they're not efficient today for other uses at that location? They are simply not being used for the purposes of NSA. I assume at some point there are considerations of potential job loss in communities.
No, sir, I don't think, I would have to go back and dig into that. My initial reaction is no.
That's not part of it.
It's not part of it. It's because we move those people into other facilities as we build other facilities. And in every facility that, for instance, we may, if we create a new facility to do a particular type of operation, the facility that people leave to go into that, we take a look at it and say, could this be repurposed? Could it be used for other purposes, or is it the condition of the facility such that it's time to get rid of it?
Okay.
We used to have a rule when I was in the Air Force to build a building, tear a building down, unless you had some other purpose for it. But that's an aspiration that isn't always backed up by the funds to do it.
And one final point, and more of a point, having worn a number of hats on this subcommittee, remember conversations and directives from the Committee on Lab-Directed Research.
Yes.
Looking at my notes for the hearing, I understand that there are new accounting rules that went into effect in October. Also understand that the Laboratory Commission made certain recommendations. In hope, after all of these years, we're making some progress on lab-directed research, accounting, limitation,
I'm not the expert.
to overhead. It's deja vu here.
I know that came up in the testimony earlier with the Secretary, and it's something that I am not the expert on in terms of that, other than to say.
You need to be, though.
I know. There has been some legislation that set a floor of no less than 5%, no more than 7% on that. I will tell you, when I talk to the laboratory directors, they say, and the plant directors for plant-directed research and development, they say this is one of the most important tools they have in terms of recruitment, in terms of retention of qualified individuals, and in terms of actually doing some leading-edge science.
And I wouldn't argue that point, but there are limitations, and
Yes.
looking for the limitations to be abided by.
Okay.
So, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vislowski, and I believe that will conclude our hearing today. I want to thank each and every one of you all for your service to our country and for performing the vital tasks that NNSA does for our great nation. And with that, we'll gavel out.
Thanks, sir.